The transport ship drifted silently through the void, carrying soldiers from many worlds. Each warrior sat quietly in their assigned section, secured by magnetic harnesses, their minds heavy with the weight of what was coming. Among them was Koresh, a soldier of the Valen race. His kind were tall, thin-limbed, with smooth scales that reflected a faint blue under the artificial lights. They were known for their discipline and sharp tactical minds, but they lacked the reckless courage that some other species possessed. Koresh's black eyes studied the new comrades assigned to his battalion. He saw armored Trelks with their forearms and heavy shields, silent Zerns, their bodies wrapped in metallic exosuits, and then he saw them, the humans. The humans did not sit in silence like the others. They laughed. They joked. One was humming a song, tapping their boot against the floor as if the ship were not heading into a war zone. Another human chewed something noisily, offering a small packet of the strange food to his fellow soldiers. Koresh watched in disbelief. How could they laugh before battle? Did they not fear the stories of the enemy they were about to face? The enemy was unlike anything Koresh had faced before. The machines. The Sarnath. They had no mercy, no exhaustion, no hesitation. They advanced like a storm, crushing defenses and tearing apart armies without pause. Koresh had lost 2 cousins already in the early stages of this war. Their villages had been turned to glass under the machine's weapons. Even remembering it made his chest tighten. Yet beside him, one of the humans leaned back and stretched, smiling as though this were just another day. "First time out here?" the human asked. His nameplate read Mason. Koresh blinked, unsure how to answer. "It is my first deployment with humans," he said, his voice low and careful. Mason grinned wider. "Then you're in for a ride. Don't worry, we've done this before." He spoke as if the enemy were nothing more than a common nuisance. Koresh found no comfort in those words. To him, it sounded like arrogance. The transport ship shook slightly as it entered the atmosphere of the contested world. Outside, Koresh could see smoke rising from the horizon, dark clouds swirling above ruined cities. The landscape was scarred with craters and burning wreckage. The machines had been here already. When the order came to disembark, the soldiers moved quickly. The ramp lowered and heat rushed into the ship. Koresh stepped onto soil that was blackened and cracked. His boots sank slightly into the dust. The air carried the smell of burnt metal and something sour he could not identify. The humans were the first to spread out, rifles raised, eyes scanning the ruined streets. They moved with a confidence that seemed out of place. One of them muttered a joke about the smell and another laughed. Koresh tightened his grip on his plasma spear. He could not understand them. Laughter here on this world of death? What kind of species found humor in such a place? The battalion set up camp in the shadow of a half-destroyed building. Orders were given, sentries posted. Koresh sat with his squad, listening to the soft hum of their equipment. His people spoke little, conserving energy and maintaining calm. The humans, however, built a small fire with pieces of broken wood they found. They gathered around it, talking, sharing food, telling stories. Koresh could not resist listening. He heard them speak of their homes, their families, and their past battles. One soldier described surviving an ambush on another world. Instead of focusing on the horror, he made the others laugh with a ridiculous detail about tripping over his own gear while running. The group roared with amusement. Koresh did not laugh. He did not understand. To him, war was no place for such things. War was pain. War was silence. War was loss. But he could not look away from them. They were different. Later that night, Koresh was assigned to patrol with 2 humans. Mason was one of them, and the other was a woman named Harper. They moved through the ruins carefully, watching for enemy scouts. "Tell me something, Koresh," Mason said after a while. "Do your people always stay so quiet? You barely say a word." "My people believe words are wasted if they do not serve purpose," Koresh answered. Harper chuckled softly. "That explains it. Humans talk too much. We talk when we're nervous, we talk when we're happy, we talk when we're scared. Silence drives us crazy." Koresh tilted his head. "Even when danger is near?" "Especially then," Harper replied. "Silence makes the fear worse. If we're talking, we're alive. If we're joking, we're still fighting." Koresh absorbed those words. To him, silence was strength. To humans, silence was weakness. It was strange. Their patrol ended without incident, and they returned to camp. Koresh lay on his mat, staring up at the sky where distant stars flickered faintly through the smoke. Sleep did not come easily. He thought of the humans' laughter, their chatter, their energy. He wondered if it was true, if noise was their weapon against fear. The next morning, orders arrived. The battalion would move to the forward line to support a defensive position. Koresh felt his heart tighten. This would be his first true combat against the machines. He glanced at the humans. They were checking weapons, adjusting armor, still talking to each other. Harper slapped Mason on the shoulder and said something that made them both laugh again. Koresh gripped his weapon. He could not understand them, but soon he would see them in battle. Perhaps then their strange behavior would make sense, or perhaps it would be their downfall. As the convoy moved forward, Koresh could feel the ground tremble. The machines were near. The horizon glowed faintly with the light of their advancing forces. The sound of mechanical movement echoed across the ruined landscape. Fear tightened around his chest. Beside him, Mason muttered with a grin, "Here we go." Koresh turned to him, confused. "You smile before battle?" Mason raised his rifle and winked. "Of course. If you're not smiling, you're already halfway to losing." The machines appeared then, a line of cold, metallic forms marching without pause. Their red eyes glowed in the smoke. Koresh felt his heart race, and then the humans shouted, loud, fierce, almost joyful as they charged forward to meet the enemy. Koresh stood frozen for a moment, staring. This was madness. This was chaos. And yet somehow it seemed to work. The first clash had begun. The battlefield shook as the machines advanced. Their steps were heavy, their formation perfect, and their glowing red optics burned like fire in the smoke-filled air. They came in endless lines, metal bodies shining beneath the dim light of the ruined sky. Koresh stood with his battalion, his plasma spear gripped tightly in his hands. His heart pounded in his chest. The enemy was exactly as he remembered from the stories, merciless, unfeeling, and unstoppable. The Sarnath did not hesitate, did not retreat, and did not fear death. Because they could not die in the same way. They were machines built for war, built to erase. The order rang out. "Hold positions. Do not break the line." Koresh planted his feet, readying himself for the storm. But before he could focus, the humans beside him broke into action. Mason, Harper, and the others shouted as they rushed forward, raising their rifles and firing bright streams of energy into the advancing machines. Their voices were not calm or quiet. They roared like wild beasts. "Come on. Push them back," Mason shouted, his voice carrying over the explosions. Koresh's eyes widened. They were not waiting for the machines to come to them. They were charging first. The ground shook as humans rushed ahead, their boots slamming against the broken earth. The sound of their battle cries filled the air. To Koresh's disciplined mind, it seemed reckless, almost suicidal. But the machines hesitated just for a moment as the humans slammed into them with a fury unlike anything Koresh had seen before. Koresh's instincts screamed at him to move, and he did. He leapt forward, his plasma spear crackling as it pierced the chest of one of the machines. Sparks flew and the machine collapsed. Koresh withdrew the spear quickly, spinning to strike another. The battlefield became chaos. Explosions rang out, smoke filled the air, and the cries of both victory and pain echoed through the ruins. Koresh tried to stay close to his unit, but the humans surged like a storm, breaking formation, striking from every angle. At one point, Koresh saw Harper tackle a machine almost twice her size, slamming a grenade into its chest before rolling away. The explosion tore the machine apart. She stood up, coughing, and shouted, "That's how you do it!" Koresh could not believe it. She was smiling in the middle of the carnage. The machines adapted quickly, returning fire with deadly precision. Red beams of plasma streaked through the air. Koresh ducked behind a slab of broken concrete as a blast scorched the ground beside him. He heard the cries of soldiers, some falling, some still fighting. "Mason," Harper shouted. Koresh looked up just in time to see Mason hit by a beam across his arm. His armor sizzled and he dropped his rifle with a grunt. But instead of retreating, Mason picked the weapon back up with his other hand, his face twisted with determination. He pushed forward, firing with one arm while blood ran down the other. Koresh's chest tightened. Among his people, an injured soldier was expected to fall back to preserve their life. But Mason kept going, using his body as a shield to protect others. Another machine closed in, its blades raised high. Koresh's instincts took over. He lunged forward, his plasma spear striking through the machine's core just before it reached Mason. The enemy fell with a crash, its glowing eyes flickering out. Mason turned, grinning despite the pain in his arm. Nice save, partner. He shouted over the noise. Koresh stared at him in disbelief. Blood was dripping from Mason's sleeve, and yet he laughed. Was this bravery? Or was it madness? The battle raged on for what felt like endless hours. The machines pressed forward, their numbers overwhelming, but the humans never stopped. They moved like fire, spreading across the field, forcing the machines to break their perfect formations. Koresh fought beside them, his movements becoming faster, more desperate. He felt something strange stirring inside him. It was not just fear of the enemy, it was fear of the humans themselves. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like creatures possessed by something greater. Their energy was terrifying. At one point, Koresh found himself surrounded. 3 machines closed in, their weapons raised. He prepared for the end, his chest tightening with dread. But before they could strike, a group of humans stormed in, shouting as they fired grenades and rifles. The machines exploded in a shower of sparks, and one of the humans grabbed Koresh's arm, pulling him to his feet. "You're not dying today, friend," the soldier shouted. Koresh stumbled, his breath heavy. They had saved him without hesitation, risking themselves to pull him out. He could not understand it. Among his people, such risks were rare. Survival of the group mattered, yes, but never at such cost to the individual. The battle reached its peak as the machines brought out heavier units, tall constructs with cannons mounted on their arms. The ground split beneath their steps. Koresh's battalion began to falter, their lines thinning under the pressure. But the humans? They refused to yield. Mason, even with his injured arm, rallied those around him. Harper barked orders, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Aim for the joints. Don't let them get close." Koresh found himself following them, not his own commanders. Something in their fire, their unbroken spirit, drew him in. He thrust his spear again and again, standing shoulder to shoulder with the humans as the larger machines crashed down. Hours later, when the smoke finally cleared and the last of the machines retreated, the battlefield was unrecognizable. Fires burned in the ruins, and the air smelled of metal and ash. Bodies, both machine and organic, littered the ground. Koresh stood among the survivors, his chest heaving. His armor was scorched, his body aching, but he was alive. Nearby, Mason sat against a broken wall, clutching his injured arm but still smiling. Harper was checking on the wounded, her face grim but determined. Other humans laughed weakly, some even singing as they patched each other up. Koresh could not look away. He had seen warriors before. He had seen courage before, but this was something else. The humans did not fear the machines the way others did. They turned fear into fuel, into fire. They were terrifying not because of their weapons, but because of their will. As Koresh cleaned his weapon, he realized something that made his heart pound even harder. The true terror was not the enemy before them. The true terror was standing beside humans in combat and seeing what they became when pushed to the edge. The ruins of the city were silent after the battle. Smoke drifted from broken buildings, and the ground was blackened with ash and shattered metal. The machines had pulled back, but no one believed it would last for long. Everyone knew they would return, stronger and more relentless than before. Koresh sat on a broken piece of wall, his plasma spear resting across his knees. His scales were scorched and his arms trembled from exhaustion. Around him, soldiers of different species tended to their wounds, repaired their weapons, and whispered about the losses. Many had fallen. Too many. He glanced toward the humans. Despite the exhaustion painted across their faces, they were not silent. Mason sat with his arm wrapped in a bandage, his other hand busy adjusting the power cell of his rifle. Harper crouched nearby, speaking softly to a young recruit who looked ready to collapse. The boy was shaking, his hand stained with dust and blood. Harper placed a hand on his shoulder and said words Koresh could not hear, but whatever she said made the boy straighten his back and nod. Koresh frowned. His people would have left the boy alone, expecting him to master his fear in silence. But humans were different. They spoke, they reassured, they carried each other through despair. As night fell, the battalion gathered in the remains of a large structure that once might have been a government building. Walls cracked and half-broken still offered some shelter. Fires were lit in metal barrels, their smoke curling into the starless sky. Soldiers ate what little rations they had left. Supplies were running low and everyone knew it. Koresh chewed his nutrient paste in silence, his dark eyes studying the humans again. They were tired, bruised, and dirty, yet they spoke in loud voices. Some told stories of home, green fields, oceans, and shining cities. Others laughed at jokes that made no sense to Koresh. Their voices filled the broken hall, echoing off the cracked walls, pushing back the heavy silence that threatened to suffocate the camp. Finally, Koresh turned to Mason, who was sitting near the fire. "Why do you laugh?" he asked suddenly. Mason blinked, then smiled. "Because if we don't, fear wins. Here?" Koresh tilted his head. "Fear does not leave simply because you speak or laugh." "True," Mason said, poking the fire with a piece of metal. "But laughter makes fear small. If we laugh, it means we're still in control. If we tell stories, it means we still remember who we are. That's how humans fight fear. We drown it out." Harper, who had been listening, added, "Silence is worse. Silence lets fear grow until it eats you from the inside." Koresh lowered his gaze. His people had always believed silence was discipline, that words were weakness. But watching the humans, he began to wonder if perhaps silence was a prison. The night deepened, and with it came danger. The first sound was distant metal scraping against stone, the faint rhythm of mechanical steps. The sentries called out, and suddenly everyone was on their feet, weapons ready. The machines were returning, but they did not launch a full attack. Instead, they tested the defenses, sending small squads to probe the perimeter. Red beams cut through the darkness as the coalition soldiers fired back. The night turned into a nightmare of scattered skirmishes. Koresh fought alongside Harper during one of the sudden assaults. The machines crawled over the ruins like insects, their glowing eyes cutting through the shadows. Koresh's spear cracked with energy as he stabbed through one, then spun to block another. Harper's rifle barked in bursts, each shot precise and sharp. "They won't stop," Koresh growled as he struck again. "They never do," Harper answered, slamming another magazine into her weapon. "That's why we don't stop either." The battle lasted minutes, then ended as quickly as it began. The machines retreated again into the night, their movements fading into silence, but the camp remained tense. No one slept. Every shadow looked alive, every gust of wind carried the fear of another attack. Hours passed like this, bursts of violence, followed by uneasy silence. The soldiers were exhausted, their eyes heavy, their nerves stretched thin. Supplies dwindled further, and yet, through it all, the humans refused to let despair take hold. When one soldier panicked after a sudden explosion, Harper grabbed him and said firmly, "Breathe. You're not dead. Look at me. You're alive, and that means you keep fighting." When another soldier collapsed in exhaustion, Mason shared his own ration, even though his arm still bled beneath the bandage. He smiled and said, "Eat, friend. Tomorrow we'll have a feast back home. This is just the appetizer." The humans' voices carried through the camp, pulling others back from the edge of hopelessness. Even Koresh felt it. He wanted to deny it, but something inside him shifted each time he heard their laughter in the middle of the night. By dawn, the survivors were weary beyond measure. The machines had pulled back once more, perhaps to prepare for a larger assault. Koresh sat on the broken steps of the ruined building, his spear across his knees, his eyes staring at the horizon. His body trembled with exhaustion, but his mind replayed the night over and over. He had seen humans charge into darkness, shouting so loudly that even the machines seemed to hesitate. He had seen them drag wounded comrades to safety without a second thought. He had seen them take fear and transform it into something powerful, something that burned brighter than despair. Koresh realized then what made them different. Other species feared in silence. Humans shouted through their fear, turned it into fire, and used it to fight harder. He looked toward Mason and Harper, who were speaking quietly near the fire, their faces drawn, but their eyes alive. He felt both admiration and unease. "This is the meaning of terror," Koresh whispered to himself. Not terror of the machines, though they were terrifying. No, the true terror was the humans. To see them in combat, to see how they embraced fear and chaos, was to witness something that defied reason. And yet, that terror brought strength. Koresh stood, gripping his spear tightly. The long night had shown him something he had never understood before. He no longer feared standing beside humans. He feared what they might become if unleashed fully, but he also knew that with them, survival was possible. The sun rose weakly over the broken city, casting pale light on the ruins. The soldiers prepared for the next battle, their faces grim but determined. The machines would come again. Everyone knew it. But Koresh no longer felt the same despair as before. because he had stood beside humans in the long night, and he had learned the truth. Fear did not break them. Fear made them stronger. The sun barely rose above the horizon, casting a pale light over the ruined city. Smoke still spiraled from shattered buildings, and the ground was scarred by yesterday's battle. Koresh's body ached from the previous night, but there was no time to rest. Orders had arrived. The coalition forces were to hold a critical position at the city's center. Losing it would mean allowing the machines to march further into human-held territory. Koresh adjusted his armor, checking the scratches and scorched marks from earlier battles. The humans moved around him with energy he could not comprehend. Mason limped slightly, his injured arm strapped across his chest, but he shouted instructions, encouraged the younger soldiers, and joked lightly to keep spirits high. Harper moved among the squads, her voice firm yet kind, guiding the frightened and the exhausted. Koresh realized he had been following them instinctively. The humans' courage pulled him forward as if their will alone could move the battlefield. "Listen up," Mason shouted, drawing Koresh's attention. "We know they're coming. We've seen their patterns. Hold your line, but don't wait for them to make the first move." "Move with us!" Koresh frowned. Strategy for his people was precise. Attack only when commanded. But the human's energy was contagious. He nodded slightly and fell in line beside them. The first wave of the machines hit suddenly, larger and faster than before. Red beams of plasma cut through the smoke as metal limbs smashed buildings and vehicles alike. Many soldiers stumbled under the chaos, but the humans surged forward. They were not afraid to throw themselves into the open, to confront the machines head-on. Koresh fought alongside Harper, who fired her rifle with calm precision. He struck down a machine trying to flank them, his spear glowing blue as it pierced the enemy's core. Mason was ahead, waving and shouting, rallying the frightened soldiers, drawing them back into the fight. Koresh's mind raced. Other species might have hesitated, but the humans moved like a storm. Unpredictable yet unstoppable. Their laughter and shouts pierced the chaos, guiding their allies and confusing the enemy. As the battle raged, Koresh noticed something extraordinary. The humans did not just fight for survival. They fought for each other. When one soldier fell, others risked themselves to pull them back. When a machine pressed too close, someone would throw themselves into danger to shield their comrades. It was not recklessness. It was devotion, courage, and raw determination fused into action. A massive machine advanced, taller than any Koresh had seen. Its metal limbs crashed against the ground, and its cannon glowed red, ready to fire. Soldiers around Koresh began to falter, fear in their eyes. But the humans stood firm. Mason shouted, "Focus on the joints. Aim together." The squad followed his instructions, firing carefully and moving as one. The machine stumbled under the combined attack, sparks flying as it struggled to keep balance. Koresh lunged forward, thrusting his spear into the glowing core. The machine fell with a deafening crash. Koresh's chest heaved as he stepped back. Around him, the humans cheered, clapping each other on the back despite the destruction surrounding them. They smiled, even when dust covered their faces and blood stained their armor. The second wave of the machines came without warning. The coalition's lines trembled under the pressure. Koresh's fellow soldiers from other species began to retreat, their morale cracking under the relentless assault. But the humans did not retreat. "They're not giving up," Koresh whispered to Harper as they regrouped. "Never," Harper said simply, her eyes blazing with determination. "We fight until the last breath. That's what humans do." Koresh understood then. The human strength was not only in their weapons or numbers, it was in their will, in the fire inside them that refused to die. During a moment of chaos, Koresh found Mason surrounded by 3 machines. Mason grinned, raising his rifle even with his injured arm. "Koresh!" he shouted. "Cover me!" Without hesitation, Koresh rushed in, striking one machine with his spear. Mason fired at another while dodging the third, and together they tore through the enemies. When the battle ended, Mason patted Koresh on the shoulder. "See? Nothing to worry about." Koresh's mind reeled. His heart pounded not with fear of the enemy, but with awe at what he had just witnessed. Humans were terrifying in battle, yes, but not in the way he had feared. Their terror was in their courage, their unpredictability, their refusal to yield even when the world seemed against them. As the day wore on, the enemy pressed harder. They brought reinforcements, machines larger and more advanced than before. The coalition lines began to crack. Koresh could feel panic rising among the other species, but the humans did not falter. Mason and Harper moved between the soldiers, shouting instructions, encouragement, and reminders to keep fighting. Every time someone faltered, they were there to lift them up. Every time a machine broke through, humans rushed in to push it back. Koresh joined a group of humans defending a strategic choke point. They fought with synergy, moving as one, reading each other's actions without words. Mason ducked, firing, while Harper threw a grenade to clear a machine in their path. Koresh struck another with his spear. The humans worked instinctively together, pulling him into their rhythm. Hours passed in a blur of heat, smoke, and battle cries. Koresh's muscles ached. His body was covered in grime and burns, yet he could not stop fighting. Something inside him had changed. Fear still lingered, but it was different now. It was sharp and focused. It was a tool, not a chain. Finally, the enemy began to retreat. The humans, bloodied and exhausted, cheered, their voices carrying over the ruined city. Koresh stood among them, looking at the destruction around them. Many had fallen and many more were injured, but the humans still smiled, still laughed, still helped each other to stand. Koresh felt a strange mixture of relief and dread. He had survived. The humans had survived, but the true test was still ahead. The machines would return stronger than before, and Koresh now knew something terrifying. He had seen what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge. They were wild, relentless, and unstoppable when united. The other species might have feared them, dismissed them as reckless, or thought their courage foolish. But Koresh knew better now. He glanced at Mason and Harper, their faces streaked with grime, their armor battered, but their eyes still bright. He realized the truth. The humans' courage was contagious. It spread like fire across the battlefield, igniting others to fight harder, to stand longer, to push further than anyone thought possible. Koresh's chest tightened as he whispered to himself, This is what terror truly is. Not fear of the enemy, but standing beside them and realizing what they can become. For the first time, Koresh did not feel small or cautious. He felt part of something larger, something fierce and alive. The humans had shown him that battle was more than strategy, more than numbers, more than survival. It was about will, courage, and the unwillingness to let darkness take hold. As night fell again, the battalion prepared for the next wave. Fires were lit, wounds were tended, and weapons were readied. Koresh moved through the camp, observing humans laughing softly, joking even in the shadow of exhaustion, reminding others that they were still alive. Koresh knew that tomorrow would bring another battle, possibly even greater than today. But he also knew this. If he stood beside humans again, he would fight differently. Fear had not disappeared, but it had become something else, something he could wield, something that could make him stronger. The long, brutal day had ended, but the war was far from over. And Koresh, standing among humans, understood more clearly than ever the meaning of true terror, and the extraordinary courage it could inspire. The battlefield was silent now. Smoke rose from shattered buildings, and the acrid smell of burnt metal filled the air. The machines had retreated, leaving behind twisted wreckage and lifeless shells of their mechanical bodies. Koresh stood among the survivors, his spear resting on the ground, his chest heaving from exhaustion. Around him, soldiers of all species checked their equipment, helped the injured, and tried to catch a few moments of rest. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows over the ruined city. For the first time in days, Koresh felt a moment of stillness. He turned toward the humans. Mason leaned against a broken wall, his arm bandaged but still moving slightly, checking his rifle. Harper moved among the wounded, speaking softly, giving words of comfort and encouragement. Despite their own injuries, they worked tirelessly, lifting spirits as much as tending to wounds. Koresh watched silently. He had followed humans into battle before, but now he understood them in a way he never could before. Their courage was not just instinct, not just skill. It was something deeper, something almost impossible to define. They fought with fire in their hearts, and they inspired everyone around them to rise to that same fire. He remembered the first day he had arrived with them, the chaos, the laughter, the strange way they faced death without hesitation. He remembered the long night of skirmishes, the way they refused to give in to fear, and the turning point when they held the city center together, forcing the enemy to retreat. Koresh realized that he had misunderstood humans before. He had thought them reckless, fragile, and emotional. He had judged them by the discipline of his own people, but he had learned that humans were not fragile. They were resilient beyond reason. They were not reckless, they were fearless in a way that made the impossible possible. And their emotions were not weaknesses. They were sources of strength, bonds that held them together when the universe tried to tear them apart. As the survivors gathered near a ruined plaza, Mason stood and called out, "Everyone, listen up. We made it through today. We're alive, and that means we keep fighting." His voice rang out strong and steady, cutting through the heavy air of exhaustion. "We lost some good soldiers, but we hold our ground. That's what counts. We fight for each other, and we never stop." The humans cheered, and Koresh felt a strange warmth in his chest. The other species hesitated, unsure at first, but slowly they began to cheer too. Something about the humans' defiance, their refusal to yield, pulled even the most cautious soldiers into hope. Koresh walked among them, helping a Trelk soldier to stand, nodding at a Zern who adjusted their armor. He realized then that humans fought not only for themselves but for everyone beside them. They were terrifying in their courage, yes, but they were also extraordinary, lifting others from despair and creating strength from fear. He remembered Mason's words from the first night. "If we don't laugh, fear wins." Koresh finally understood what Mason had meant. Fear did not disappear. The machines were still out there waiting to strike again. But the humans faced it not with silence or withdrawal but with action, with defiance and with connection. Their courage was not solitary. It spread, igniting determination in everyone nearby. Night fell once more and the soldiers huddled in makeshift shelters. Fires burned in small clusters, their warmth a fragile comfort against the cold of the ruined city. Koresh sat beside Mason and Harper, quietly observing them. "Koresh," Harper said softly, "you've been quiet today. You've seen a lot." Koresh nodded. "I have seen something I do not fully understand. Humans, you are terrifying, but not like the machines. You are alive in a way my people cannot comprehend. You turn fear into strength." Mason chuckled softly, wincing as he adjusted his injured arm. "That's one way to put it. Another way to put it is this. We're stubborn. We don't give up. No matter what's in front of us, we keep moving, we keep fighting, and we keep helping each other. Fear doesn't get to control us." Koresh remained silent, thinking. The truth was larger than words. Humans in battle were unpredictable, wild, and relentless. They laughed when they should have cried. They pushed forward when others would fall back. And through all of it, they never abandoned each other. That combination, courage, willpower, and loyalty, was something no other species he had encountered possessed in equal measure. The alien's gaze turned to the horizon. The enemy would return. The machines would not forgive defeat. Their numbers and cold precision meant that the next clash could be even more dangerous. Yet Koresh no longer felt the despair he had felt in the first days. He had learned the truth. Standing beside humans in combat did not just bring fear. It brought clarity, understanding, and determination. In the quiet moments that followed, Koresh walked among the soldiers. He helped adjust armor, handed out water, and offered quiet words of encouragement where he could. He realized that courage was contagious. Just as humans had taught him how to fight fear, he could now help carry it forward, sharing it with those who had not yet seen the full measure of human determination. As the night deepened, Koresh climbed to the top of a broken building. From there he could see the full city, a landscape of ruin and firelight, a battlefield of death and survival. He remembered the first time he had arrived, the human laughter, the jokes in the face of danger, the reckless courage that had both shocked and confused him. Now he understood. The true terror of standing beside humans in combat was not in the fear of dying. It was in seeing what they could become, unstoppable, unyielding, and alive with purpose. They were terrifying in their courage, in their bond to one another, and in the way they could turn even the bleakest moment into a reason to fight. Koresh clenched his fists, feeling a mix of awe and respect. Humans were extraordinary. They were wild and unpredictable, yet fiercely loyal. They did not just survive, they inspired survival, and they did it in a way that no other species he had encountered could match. When the first light of dawn broke over the city, the survivors were ready. They checked their weapons, tended to wounds, and whispered prayers or words of encouragement. Koresh stood beside Mason and Harper once more, ready to face whatever came next. The machines would return as they always did. The battle would continue and many would fall. But Koresh no longer feared what lay ahead. Not because he was stronger, not because he was braver, but because he had stood beside humans. He had seen their courage, their determination, and their extraordinary will to fight, and he knew that with them, survival and even victory was possible. Koresh took a deep breath, inhaling the acrid scent of the ruined city. He felt a strange calm settle over him. Terror had not disappeared. It was still there, a shadow behind every movement, a whisper in the wind, but now it was tempered by understanding, by admiration, and by a recognition of something greater than himself. He whispered softly to no one in particular. This is the meaning of terror, and the meaning of courage. As the sun rose higher, the survivors began to move forward, preparing for the battles yet to come. Koresh walked beside them, his spear in hand, his eyes sharp, his mind clear. He would fight, yes, but he would fight beside humans, and that made all the difference, because in their presence, terror became clarity, fear became strength, and courage became something that could not be extinguished. And Koresh, for the first time in his life, truly understood both the horror and the wonder of standing beside humans in combat.